All right, sir, would you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that any testimony you give today will be the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Marsh, go ahead and present your testimony, please.
Okay, well, good afternoon. I'm Don Marsh. I'm the co-founder and president of Sense. It's a nonprofit organization representing Eastside residents who oppose PSE's Energize Eastside project. When I first became involved with Energize Eastside more than 8 years ago, I was initially concerned about the impacts and safety risks it presented to my neighborhood in South Bellevue. I attended every meeting of the Community Advisory Group, which PSE convened to decide where the new transmission line would go. I met other neighborhood leaders in the group, and we shared our frustrations that PSE wasn't really listening to us or answering our questions regarding the need for the project or the feasibility of alternatives. We decided to form the Coalition of Eastside Neighborhoods for Sensible Energy, or SENSE for short. Although the primary focus of SENSE has been to educate the public about the shortcomings of Energize Eastside, SENSE members have been involved in other actions to protect the safety, beauty, and quality of life of our community in regard to energy projects and policies. As the Community Advisory Group was wrapping up, I was the primary author of the minority report that was included in the final document. This dissent was signed by the majority of the neighborhood representatives in the group, as well as Tim McHarg, the Community Development Director for the City of Newcastle. Soon after that, I began to attend meetings of PSE's Integrated Resource Plan Advisory Group. In 2018, PSE recognized my qualifications to participate in a select group of advisors known as the Technical Advisory Group for the company's 2019 Integrated Resource Plan. In 2021, I was asked to lead a group of environmental and civic organizations known as the Washington Clean Energy Coalition. Our coalition's technical input has been quoted in policy orders issued by the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. I was also invited to serve on the Washington State Energy Committee of the Sierra Club. In that role, PSE invited me to participate in the development of a time-varying rates pilot program that PSE will propose to state regulators this year. In 2015, I made the decision to work part-time so I could devote more time to energy and environmental issues. Since then, I've been interviewed for radio and television newscasts, newspapers, and industry newsletters. I have provided testimony in land use hearings, city and county council meetings, and at the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. I have a CV it's been submitted as evidence that covers my educational background and also my career as a software engineer and entrepreneur. So anyway, that's a bit about my background. Before I proceed, I want to be clear that I'm here to answer your questions. If I say something that doesn't make sense, or if my presentation is unclear at any point, please feel free to interrupt me and allow me to clarify before we go deeper. I've spent hours each day studying this project for the past 8 years, and I might take something for granted that needs a little more explanation. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. During my time leading Sense, we have engaged experts to evaluate the need for Energize Eastside. For over 7 years, Sense has asked why PSE hasn't canceled its controversial and expensive power line project when many utilities are investing in modern grid technologies that provide better year-round reliability without the safety, environmental, and aesthetic problems created by Energize Eastside. Many citizens assume that a massive project like Energize Eastside would require approval prior to construction by the state agency that regulates PSE, the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. That is not the case. While PSE could have submitted one application for Energize Eastside to the Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council, the company chose not to do that. Instead, it submitted 5 applications to 4 different cities. As a result, the only oversight for the project will occur in city land use hearings like this one. You, Mr. Hearing Examiner, are the sole authority to determine whether PSE has proved that Energize Eastside satisfies Newcastle's code requirements. There will be no other review, except perhaps in the courts. For residents who would be impacted by this project, we are relying on your clear-eyed and fair judgment. Newcastle Municipal Code 1844052, subsection A3, requires PSE to demonstrate operational need for its proposal. The best way to prove need is with relevant numerical data. Let's examine what PSE has provided to document the need. In January 2014, PSE introduced Energize Eastside at a meeting of the Somerset Community Association. I was in the room when PSE Vice President Andy Wappler showed an early version of this chart. As you can see, the steep lines that depict increasing demand for electricity on the east side cross the dashed lines that represent the capacity of the grid. Capacity refers to the amount of electricity measured in megawatts that the grid can deliver before experiencing physical damage. As the demand lines meet the system capacity lines, the public was led to believe we might experience rolling blackouts after 2018. However, Mr. Wappler failed to tell us that the red dashed lines aren't showing the normal capacity of the east side grid. Instead, they represent a theoretical scenario based on a computer simulation of a perfect storm of crises, including 1, failure of half the industrial-sized transformers that serve the east side. 2, loss of more than half the local generation facilities serving our region. 3, a transfer to Canada of a huge amount of electricity, more than twice the highest amount of electricity ever used on the east side. And 4, some other unpredictable event, such as a car crashing into a power pole. This combined scenario is described in the 2013 Eastside Needs Assessment, the first study published by PSE that describes the problem that Energize Eastside is intended to fix. The study's assumptions are documented on pages 7, 8, 10, and 13 of the Eastside Needs Assessment. Each of these events happening in isolation would reduce the capacity of the Eastside grid. When PSE assumes all 4 conditions occur simultaneously, the system capacity range would be reduced to the 700 megawatt level shown in Wappler's graph, a small percentage of the grid's normal capacity. These assumptions significantly exceed NERC planning requirements. PSE will admit this perfect storm of unlikely emergencies has never occurred in the 60-year lifetime of the existing transmission lines, and it is unlikely that Eastside will face this scenario in the next 60 years. Energize Eastside would not have prevented a single outage that has ever been endured by PSE's customers. Notwithstanding these facts, PSE claims that the company is required by NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, to build Energize Eastside to keep our lights on in a perfect storm scenario like PSE has imagined. Is PSE correct in its interpretation of these NERC regulations? NERC's transmission planning document, NERC TPL-001-4, shows how a utility is permitted to respond to the scenario PSE describes. The loss of 2 large transformers is covered by condition P6 on page 9 of this standard, which I'm showing here. In the second column, labeled Initial Condition, I've highlighted the loss of a transformer. In the next column, labeled Event, we see a second transformer is lost. The final 2 columns show what kind of disruptions are permitted in this situation. NERC allows firm transmission service to be interrupted, like big transfers of electricity to Canada or California. NERC also allows non-consequential loads to be dropped, like non-critical service to homes. NERC does not require PSE to upgrade a transmission line to avoid these interruptions because NERC realizes that level of service guarantee would be too costly for PSE's customers. In our view, this is an unequivocal repudiation of PSE's project, and we really could just stop right here.
Mr. Marsh?
Yes.
This is Rick. Identify for the examiner what you're showing here on the screen so he could follow along or have reference to it.
When you're talking about the NERC transmission planning document?
The slides, your PowerPoint presentation, that's in the record, is it not?
Yes, all of these are in the record, yes.
Okay, and that would be, I believe, Exhibit 47?
I think that's right, yes.
Okay. And so the examiner can follow along with you with your exhibit.
Yes, in some places I did include the exhibit numbers. If you catch me not saying what the exhibit number is, please feel free to clarify that as we go along.
Okay, go ahead. Pardon the interruption, Mr. Marsh.
No problem. So let's go back to this graph for a minute, because there's another problem besides the misleading system capacity lines. The steep lines depicting demand for electricity are forecasts, not facts, and they are shown to be increasing at an incredible rate that is almost double the rate of population growth. It is well known that per capita consumption of electricity has been declining for many years. How could demand grow faster than population if everyone is reducing their energy consumption? Since the time PSE published this graph, SENS has asked PSE on many occasions to disclose historical Eastside peak demand for the last decade. PSE refused, claiming such disclosure is prohibited due to national security concerns. Okay, let's see how PSE's non-disclosure policies compare with other utilities. SENS asked several nearby utilities for peak demand data for their local substations. Seattle City Light, Snohomish PUD, and Tacoma Power provided the data within a couple of weeks. They did not ask why we needed the information or whether we had a security clearance. Con Edison, the privately held utility that serves New York City, has an interactive web page that allows anyone to freely explore peak demand throughout their grid. You're looking at a screenshot of the Con Edison webpage that shows the area served by the Freedom substation, which includes the former site of the Twin Towers that were destroyed in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The overlaid graph shows the peak demand on the substation for each hour of the day, as well as its maximum capacity. PSE itself has published peak demand data in the past, as illustrated by this table that appeared on the City of Bellevue's website from 2006 until 2015. PSE provided peak demand on each substation throughout the city. In the right column, PSE included a forecast of rising demand in 2020. That was forecasting 2020 demand back in 2005 or 2006. SENS has asked PSE to release an update to this table. PSE refuses. Why? We believe PSE is shy about sharing historical Eastside demand data because doing so might call attention to the gap between PSE's 2015 forecast and the demand that has actually happened on the East Side during the past 7 years. Why is there a gap? One of the problems with PSE's forecasts appears to be caused by the company's failure to properly account for climate change. For many years, PSE has been producing forecasts that are based on historical temperature data for our region that is more than 80 years old. PSE uses this data to normalize energy use that occurs under varying weather conditions. This is a standard practice for utilities because demand for electricity varies a lot depending on temperature, and different years have different weather conditions that obscure larger trends related to population, technology advances, and conservation. But PSE's reliance on data from the 1930s, when our region was significantly cooler than it is today, introduces a cold bias that justifies infrastructure projects designed for a colder climate than we actually have. In a paper in the Journal of Applied Meteorology and Climate, researchers determined that a 15-year average was the best choice for weather normalization. The New York Public Service Commission now recommends 10-year averages to account for climate change. We can illustrate the shortcomings of PSE's methodology using the winter demand graph that Synapse included in its report for the city of Newcastle. In this graph, the black line shows 80-year weather normalized demand for electricity, and the colored lines show PSE's forecasts from previous years. Both the normalized values and the forecasts generally exceed PSE's calculated capacity, shown as a red dashed line. PSE reported this 5,000 megawatt system overload limit to Synapse for its 2020 report. And that's, you can see this on page 11 of exhibit N-1-9. For any value above that red line, PSE claims we would be in danger of blackouts. But there is a huge caveat. None of the data points shown in this graph, not even the black line, represent actual demand. We downloaded PSE's actual demand figures contained in PSE's Form 1 reports to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
Mr. Marsh, let me just interrupt here. I may interrupt from time to time, just make sure we're staying on track. So your figure 5 that's now on the screen, that's for the entire PSE service area. Is that for the city of Newcastle?
PSE has not produced any forecasts or data for Newcastle, and very little for the East Side, actually.
Okay, and does this this information here, would this be for the East Side area to be served by Energize Eastside?
No, what we're seeing here is PSE's winter peak load for their entire service territory. So this really doesn't have much relation to what's happening. I mean, there's some small relation to the East Side, but it really doesn't capture what's happening at our local level.
Okay, sorry for the interruption, Mr. Marsh. Proceed.
I'm happy you clarified that. So what we're showing in this gold line, which we added to this graph, that this is the actual data that's coming from PSE's Form 1 reports. And I want you to notice that the actual demand is falling, and none of the values have ever exceeded the system overload line. So there seems to be kind of a discrepancy here. Last fall, at a hearing of the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission, one of the commissioners called PSE's use of old data and its continued refusal to account for the effects of climate change untenable. PSE responded that it would begin to factor in climate change data in the middle of 2022. By that date, the issue of Energize Eastside may be decided based on forecasts that have been skewed by old weather data. Here we add an orange dashed line to show PSE's most recent winter demand forecast, accounting for conservation, included in the 2021 Integrated Resource Plan. For the first time, PSE is forecasting a decline in winter peak demand that is expected to continue for at least the next decade. The declining trend is similar to forecasts being published by every utility in Western Washington. I should note that PSE's 2021 forecast was not yet published at the time Synapse produced its report for Newcastle. This declining forecast reinforces Synapse's conclusion that Energize Eastside is no longer necessary to serve a winter peak scenario. So let's turn our attention to the summer forecast. This graph from the final Synapse reports shows weather normalized demand appearing to increase over time. With warming weather and increased air conditioning, it's possible that summer demand is increasing, although the trend is not completely clear. In any case, all the summer peaks seem to be well above the summer load threshold that PSE shared with Synapse. The important question is, how was this load threshold determined? As Jens Nedrud explained, The summer threshold is lower than the winter set threshold because transmission lines and transformers can't shed heat as efficiently during a hot summer afternoon. Normally, grid capacity is 15 to 20% lower due to the heat. But PSE's threshold is 37% lower, placing emergency summer capacity at only 3,125 megawatts, rather than the more comprehensible level of 4,100 megawatts. Synapse should have asked PSE why the summer threshold was set so unexpectedly low. A threshold of 4,100 megawatts would be well above all the summer peaks until at least 2030. During Jens Nedrud's testimony on Tuesday, PSE apparently reconsidered this super low threshold. Mr. Nedrud showed this slide, which depicts a threshold of 3,625 megawatts, 500 megawatts higher than what PSE told Synapse. But this line is still 30% lower than the 5,200 megawatt winter threshold shown in the 2013 Eastside Needs Assessment, and we therefore question its validity. PSE has committed another potentially consequential error in this chart. As explained earlier, PSE and virtually all utilities show weather-normalized historical data to illustrate trends that can be obscured by variable weather conditions from year to year. However, in this case, PSE is showing us unnormalized, raw data values that produce misleading conclusions. For example, by showing us a huge spike caused by last year's heat dome, PSE implies that the system is about to crash and burn. If PSE showed weather normalized data, that spike would be much less dramatic, and PSE would have a hard time making its point. Let me present an alternative interpretation of this data. The orange line shows summer peak demand reported by PSE to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission without the transportation load, which is electricity delivered to customers outside PSE's service territory. As you will recall from NERC standards, this is load that can be dropped if PSE is experiencing an N-1-1 emergency. Without that additional load, every year is below PSE's system capacity threshold, except that very rare heat dome event. But if we set the threshold to the more reasonable value we would expect at 4,100 megawatts, even the heat dome is under PSE's system capacity. In other words, we don't think we have a summer peak issue, at least not yet. This conclusion is supported by the 2015 report of the independent analyst hired by the City of Bellevue. On page 67 of that report, the independent analyst found no overloads of the Eastside grid if deliveries of huge amounts of electricity to California are curtailed. Now, we all agree that we want our electric grid to be ready for the future. Even though we don't see an immediate need to address summer peak demand, it's possible we will need to reinforce the grid in the future. That need will grow gradually, so we have a little time to prepare. This week, we got a glimpse of what that future might look like when Tesla revealed it has installed 81 megapack batteries in Texas to deliver 100 megawatts of peak capacity. These batteries will help improve reliability during peak demand scenarios like the very damaging Texas freeze that happened last year. It is quite likely that a similar solution would address the Eastside's summer peak need. PSE should get a bid from Tesla to understand what the cost and reliability advantages of an energy storage solution would be. Mr. Examiner, you are aware of the impasse Sense and PSE seem to be stuck in. Sense says, show us peak demand so we can understand the need. PSE says, we can't show you that because of CEII. To break this impasse, I would like to suggest a different way that PSE can demonstrate the strain on the Eastside grid using real-world data rather than questionable simulations and without revealing any CEII data. During last year's heat dome event, the electric grid experienced a level of strain that surpassed every previous peak. Also, PSE says the grid endured an N-1 outage during that time, only one step away from the scenario PSE cites as justification for Energize Eastside. If one more outage occurred, we would be in the situation that is covered by this table from the 2015 Supplemental Eastside Needs Assessment. The highlighted numbers show that 2 transformers are over the 100% capacity limit. If PSE can show what the load level was on all 4 transformers during our unprecedented heat dome event, then we can calculate what the load level would be if 2 of the transformers had failed. This is a perfect opportunity for PSE to show what the threat is, and it won't require disclosure of CEII information because the load levels shown in this table would have been hidden under black redactions if they were covered by CEII. If there are possible overloads, the magnitude of the overloads will help us understand whether alternative solutions would be a cost-effective way to eliminate those overloads. PSE cites a blizzard of reports that supposedly justify the Energize Eastside project. But there's a big problem. Most of these reports are more than 6 years old. NERC requires assessment reports be 5 years old or less unless no consequential changes have occurred. In our case, almost everything has changed. The need, the season in which the need exists, the feasibility of technology alternatives, and our community's rising concern about climate change and unnecessary destruction of valuable urban trees. And there's another serious problem. None of PSE's studies consider how solar panels and batteries could provide a cheaper, cleaner, and more reliable solution to meet summer demand. From PSE's 2021 Integrated Resource Plan, the company says summer peaking events occur in the late afternoon/evening when the day is hottest and only last a few hours in the evening. Energy storage is a good solution for summer peaking events. And in the phase 1 draft EIS, we read, solar could help reduce summer peak loads. To satisfy the requirements of Newcastle Municipal Code 1844052 sub A4A, PSE must provide a credible study that demonstrates how solar panels and batteries could alleviate a summer peak demand scenario. PSE's project violates 4 sections of Newcastle's municipal code that require proof of operational need, proof that the project will credibly improve service reliability, thorough evaluation of alternative technologies, and mitigation of neighborhood impacts. PSE has met none of these requirements. The Energize Eastside proposal also violates federal requirements regarding permitted responses to emergency outage conditions, the age of assessment studies, and required stakeholder engagement for transmission planning. The project violates Washington State Administrative Code regarding the resource planning process. PSE refused to allow discussion by stakeholders and the Utilities and Transportation Commission during integrated resource planning meetings. In summary, Sense argues that PSE has not provided sufficient data to prove that Energize Eastside is needed. PSE has not adequately or fairly evaluated the potential of other technologies that could satisfy any future peak demand without degrading neighborhoods and the environment. PSE has not provided convincing data that Energize Eastside is safe for the city of Newcastle. Mr. Examiner, you are the only person who can determine if the risks posed by Energize Eastside would outweigh its unproven benefits. You are our only hope that logic and reasonable caution can prevail. Please balance the very unlikely threat of a short blackout, if that threat even exists, with the much more devastating threat this project poses to our homes, our peace of mind, and our loved ones. Please exercise your authority to deny this permit. Thank you.